All right, everybody, let me go around and say hello to everybody before we do some announcements. We got Felix here, who's been with us since the very beginning. I remember meeting Felix over in downtown Coral Gables as he was trying to help us put together at the very, very beginning a website. God, Felix, that was forever ago. Rick and Judy are here. Andrea is here from, again, the Midwest. She's even worse, Iowa.
You know, the New York Times just named Iowa the best state to retire in. This morning.
Why do you have to say stuff like that? Why did you have to help her out? I mean, seriously.
Because I read the newspaper. I read the paper.
The paper, lovely.
The paper.
All right, Nick is here. Nick is here. Maureen is here. Grimmy is here, our parish administrator. Pam is here from Forest Hills too. Cecilia Lissandro. Serge is here from where is he? Out in some place in the far west, out in some weird town called Sedona. Kay Schweitzer is 10 miles west of Merritt Island. Pat Sullivan is from Forest Hills. Yes, Cindy and Larry Dees are from Port Orange. Pat Kincaid is here from Miami. Alan and Eddie are here. They're usually in New York, but they're here to help Chet out. And they're here today down in Miami itself. Pat Kincaid, Cindy and Larry. There's Chet, my classmate who's doing much, much, much better. Good morning, Chet. There he is. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Okay, some announcements, everybody. First of all, Andrea's going to be with us again this morning. Felix is going to be doing some reading. Pam will be doing some reading, and Grimmy is going to be doing the tech. Okay. Secondly, immediately after service, the 5 board members will be meeting, and we're going to be discussing the following thing. Number one, whether the board is going to recommend, this is the way it works, to the congregation that Andrea come on board as an affiliated community minister and join the preaching schedule and be part of the pastoral staff. And number two, whether we will bump Michelle from being an affiliated community minister to an associate minister. She has been here for a year and is fully committed and would like to show that in that kind of way. If that happens after the board meeting, then we'll have a special meeting at the end of August where the congregation is asked to ratify that. Basically, it's very simple. The board relies upon me for honest information. We rely on the board for making decisions. And if it's a big decision, then they recommend to the congregation, and the congregation either says yes or no. It's all very transparent, very simple, and just worked this way for us from the very beginning. Okay, we want you to hold close Ray Roldan, who is still on a long road of recovery from a massive stroke. Judy had surgery and is also on the road of recovery of healing from surgery. And Chet has been through a number of procedures and is finally beginning to bounce back after some really, really tough stuff. And we're glad to see him here today. I'm rather annoyed that he's actually got his hair somewhat combed. It's annoying because he has hair. I hope you remember, Chet, a time that I actually had hair. All right, moving right along. Michelle is sharing on the 27th. We need readers. Anytime we have somebody, a service coming up, maybe wants to read, let me know. Just because I assist does not mean I have to read. We've got all kinds of reading going on. 2 other announcements, if we can. Much to my utter shock, class begins 1 week from tomorrow. And I thought I was not going to be teaching much this semester. And then the enrollment started, and guess what? 3 packed classes, much to my utter shock. And my wife is giggling because she told me this was going to happen, and I never believe it. So class World Religion goes again, and we try to deal with the sin of omission, things that religions don't want you to know, which we happily share. And finally, there are 3 ways that people give with a congregation. They give by help that they can give. They give by showing up to church when they can. And they give from their pocketbook when they can. Please remember, if you would, any of those that you can help, we are always in need. We have bills to pay, and we deeply appreciate any help you can give. We've always done this voluntarily. We've never beat the drum about this, but we're just reminding people we do need people to share and giving. The memorial candle is for tragedy, again, unfortunately today. Maui, a tourist's love And it turns out almost 100 people died in wildfires in Maui. The town itself is heavily destroyed. And, you know, it turns out on the front page of the New York Times today was mentioning that none of the alarms on the island went off. None of them. A lot of money was spent on these alarms to warn people when tragedy, hurricanes, etc. were coming, and the alarms were never turned on.
Heads will roll.
So we remember those who have died. We remember those who refuse to accept that climate does change and have serious effects. And we remember human error. Our species is not as cool and bright as it sometimes thinks it is. For all of these, we light a candle in deep, deep love and memory. May it be so. Our opening music today is by Meg Barnhouse, All Will Be Well. For those of you who wish, if you would join me with the call to worship and ask you, we will read it together for those of you who wish. The Church Has Left the Building by Margaret Weiss. The church is not a place, it is a people. The church is not just a building or an address, it is a people of the world in the world, doing the work of welcome, healing, and thriving. The church is a greeting a person, all ages and genders and abilities connecting, a community forged in trust, faith, and love. The church is the experience of our hearts, prying open the doors of radical welcome. The church is not just a building, a steeple, or a pew. The church is the coming together of the people and their experiences, of their fears, loves, and hopes, saying to anyone who hears us, welcome. Lay down your heartache, grab hold of some hope, Selah. And a morning prayer taken from Inayat Sufis, toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being united with all the illuminated souls, who form the embodiment of the universe, the spirit of guidance. Amen. And our special music, a Jamestown revival. Felix this morning is reading a fascinating reading about healing. If you would, Felix.
The thing about healing, as opposed to curing, is that it is relational. It takes time. It is inefficient, like a meandering river. Rarely does healing follow a straight or well-lit path. Rarely does it conform to our expectations or resolve in a timely manner. Walking with someone through grief or through the process of reconciliation requires patience, presence, and a willingness to wander, to take the scenic route.
Felix is going to lead us in the responsive reading. He'll read the heavy print, and I'll lead us in the italicized.
May I be no one's enemy, and may I be the friend of that which is eternal.
May I wish for every person's happiness and every none.
May I never rejoice in the ill fortune of one who has wronged me.
May I give aid and comfort to all who are in need or want.
May I never fail a friend.
May I never fail myself.
May I know people honestly and seek to be known honestly.
May I be remembered kindly.
May I forgive those who injure me, whether they do or not.
May I be forgiven by those I injure. And now a reading by Brennan Manning, and Pam Gray is going to read for us.
Okay, this is a reading from the Ragamuffin Gospel by Brendan Manning. When I get honest, I admit I am a bundle of paradoxes. I believe and I doubt. I hope and I get discouraged. I love and I hate. I feel bad about feeling good. I feel guilty about not feeling guilty. I am trusting and suspicious. I am honest and I still play games. Aristotle said, I am a rational animal. I say I am an angel with an incredible capacity for beer. To live by grace means to acknowledge my whole life story, the light side and the dark. In admitting my shadow side, I learn who I am and what God's grace means.
The Indigo Girls, Closer to Fine. Leading into Andrea's share is a reading, again by Pam for us. Have a little faith, if you would, Pam.
As a clergy person, I'd like to welcome you all to the apocalypse. Pull up a chair and make yourself uncomfortable. If, when you think of an apocalypse, you picture a scary, doom-filled punishment from above, you're not alone. Originally, though, apocalyptic literature existed not to scare the bejesus out of children so that they would be good, but to proclaim a big, hope-filled idea that dominant powers are not ultimate powers.
And this morning, Andrea will bring with us some words. They just don't tell you everything anymore.
Good morning. So, if there is such a thing as the chaplain's first rule, it is you got to feel all the feelings. And there is an argument to be made that there is a second rule that exists. You got to deal with them before they deal with you. Now, my failure to deal with those things came home to roost on December 8th of 2018. And it was a Sunday, and I had just delivered the first sermon at my congregational internship. The church had closed later than normal. I had homework that was due that evening, and so I had skipped my usual self-care activities to make it back in time for drum circle. And when I fell asleep that night, I fell asleep hard and fast. I woke up around 11, and I felt weird. I had trouble moving the right-hand side of my body. I was slurring words. And as my wife pointed out to me later on the phone, I was substituting words and phrases for the words that I actually wanted to use, a condition known as aphasia. So I went to the ER. The ER sent me home. The ER sent me home with a referral to a cardiologist, and they wrote the whole thing up as anxiety. The MRI that I had a month later said otherwise, but we're getting slightly ahead of ourselves. I went back to the ER later that month on December 28th after an exercise stress test. I did not get sent home that time. This time they sent me to the cath lab at 6:30 in the morning, where I woke up to my cardiologist saying, "Ms. Kemper, you need an operation." Story of my life. It took me 3 days to figure out what kind of operation I needed, and even then I had to drag it out of my care team. There was an assumption that someone else, somewhere else, when else had informed me of what was now very clearly scheduled. I did not know what operation I was facing. It's not that I was being obstinate. I just needed information. I wanted someone, anyone, to lay it out for me clearly, directly and in full. Once I knew that I was going to have open heart surgery and that that surgery was likely going to be a double bypass, and that no, I could not reschedule this, I could not delay this, I could not postpone this, then I could get on with the business of, well, getting on with it. My surgery ended up being scheduled for January 4th of 2019. And I remember on January 1st, New Year's Day, the loudspeaker on my floor going off at about 4 a.m. and requesting that a rapid response team go to the room next to mine. Everything in my body and soul screamed at me to jump off the bed to respond to that call. I was even halfway out of bed towards the door when I remembered that I had a rather pesky tether, an intravenous nitroglycerin drip, like that. I was the patient, not the chaplain this time. I was in care and not caring for. I hated it. Hated it. I belonged at work. I belonged in school. I belonged doing the things that I was called in my soul to do. And yet I remember this moment where I uttered to the empty room that if my grandfather could fly his plane across the country and land it while actively having a heart attack, then I should be able to go to Chicago, attend my classes with my nitro drip. Then I laughed because that whole statement was utter lunacy. My grandfather was an idiot, and he was lucky that he didn't drop that plane in the middle of St. Louis. And so I had the surgery. We did the thing. And in the weeks and months that followed, I would find these moments where I would feel out of sync with the world around me. And in every surgery until this one, my sense of time had always remained constant. This one though, it left this weird hour-ish long spot where the tape of my memory had stopped and then started again in exactly the same spot, but during which the world had continued to move past me. And now I know that that weird hour-ish period is when my heart was physically stopped so that the bypasses could be performed, when the heart-lung machine kept me alive at a cool 81 degrees. And I was talking with a chaplain friend, and he told me of the Krishna belief that when such surgeries are performed, the soul merely steps out of the body, away from the fuss, and when it is safe, steps back in. I think there's some truth to this, my friends, because whenever I talk to another heart patient, there's always an element of change that is present. We are not who we were before our bypasses or valve replacements or aortic repairs or transplants or whatever it was. Sometimes we even react well to this new reality. Sometimes, though, fear gets us. And when it comes creeping around my way, I find myself leaning on something I learned from Frank Herbert, the science fiction writer, way back in the day when I discovered it as a child. And it's this litany against fear. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is that little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn my inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Fear is a field. Got to deal with it. And the only way to do that is to go through it to the other side. Greet it, name it, move through it. The only way out is through. Sure, there are the usual questions of mortality and stuff. Different topics for different days. Instead, I'm talking about arriving for the traditional Donuts with the Chaplain event at my seminary 30 minutes late. Sitting down with a tasty glazed donut and a cup of Earl Grey tea, only to be met with the horror of your classmates because it was 5 minutes till class started. And remembering that 5 minutes is 5 minutes. More than enough time for conversation with a beloved friend and a little bit of donut for the road. Only takes 30 seconds to get upstairs. We take so much for granted, and yet in a flash, it can all be taken away. We can go from full speed ahead to cancel your plans, we're cracking your chest within 24 hours, only to learn what it means to need help standing up to get to the bathroom. We navigate these changes with attempts at grace, humility, and compassion. We too often forget that we have to navigate them with grief, gratitude, and joy too. And we mix in way too much anger, rage, and denial. We are not always our own best agents, which is probably why there was a singular image that became fixed in my mind as I started my cardiac rehab. And it was the operating room table. Couldn't get out of my brain. Now, the operating table for me was a stainless steel table, about 7 feet long. It had 2 wings on either side. And it was pretty much the same table you see in the execution chamber of every procedural ever. It's the same shape as the cross, the same form as the inverted form of Odin on the world tree. All those places of liminality and life held in care by others, of analysis, judgment, repair, death, and my favorite, resurrection. I climbed up onto my table. I was the one who spread my arms wide. I felt the straps tighten, and to quell my panic, I repeated a mantra of trust the process. The only way out of this is through it. The anesthesiologist told my wife I didn't go to sleep easily, that I kept telling stories to the surgical team. Note, he was not amused. I like to think it's because those stories, whatever they were, needed to be told. Such is the way of things. Yet, having been on that table, I feel a kinship to all those who came before and all those who will come after. To every heart patient, to every convict, to every addict, to every survivor, to anyone ever strapped to a tree or a table, pierced or drugged, nailed or hung. And I work to explore that kinship with care, knowing there are many stories there that are never going to be mine to tell. It is an exploration that is best done in community, because that's where grace lives. Redemption and second chances also live there for those who need them, for those who seek them. I know I got lucky. No heart damage, no heart muscle damage. Nothing that couldn't be fixed by grafts. Small dot in my brain from the stroke and an occasional stutter. Heck, no one, except for one annoying dude on Instagram, ever even sent me trite words from any scriptures to comfort me in my hours of need. Even the chaplains at the hospital had the strength of spirit to say to me plainly, "This is some real stuff, Andrea." Because it was, because it is, as it always will be. And that is the answer, at least for now. This is some real stuff. It's just how we should talk to each other more. This is some real stuff, friend. Let me help. Remember, we are all blessedly beautiful beings of a startling, radiant universe. One that is constantly in motion, constantly rediscovering itself. And each of us needs each other more than we can ever realize. The only way out is through, and the way out is love, and love knows no limits. We've got this. We do. Selah.
Appropriately, spirit of life. I suspect actually that the way we do a agape is really a riff off of what Andrea said. Where do you go as you're working through it? Where do you go when the fear scratches you badly and haunts you? Hopefully, there is a community of love and acceptance of who and what we are. The bread is very simple, and from its very roots was offered to everybody as a sign of welcome. You're here. And a cup, together with bread, a cup to wash down the bread, was a sign of welcome here amongst friends. When All Souls started, we wanted to do this to remind everybody, as you journey, as you cope, as you deal with fear, the joy of healing, wherever you are, there is room here for bread and cup as a symbol of we got this, a symbol of we've got this. And so today, again, one more time, bread and cup symbolically for everybody here to remind us we've got this. No matter where we are, we hold hands. We've got this. And we say those words, isn't it appropriate after what she said? We say the words from Winnie the Pooh. He got it, and shares some words of how he got it with us. If you could pull it up. And I'm going to ask you to repeat these after me. Promise me you'll remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. God didn't promise days without pain, laughter without sorrows, sun without rain. But the divine did promise strength for the day, comfort for the tears, and light for the way. Andrea, do you have a few words, a prayer before we part?
I do. I do. Ow. If I can stop being bit by my cat. Most holy God, divine source known by so many names and none. We've come here in this blessed community, reminded of our connections between each other, reminded of the connections between those who couldn't be here, reminded of the connections between those who we don't even know yet. as we go from here, let us remember we are never ever alone. We are always in search of more connection. We are the ambassadors of love. And we have always. We are always going to be the ones who have got this. Selah.
Life to the Fix by the record company. Please do stay for a minute so we can say goodbye to everybody before the board meeting. Our prayer, which is a continuing mix of Hindu and Irish thought. Now may the road rise to meet you, and may the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and may the rains fall softly upon your fields. And when we meet again, may the divine in me greet and embrace the divine in you. Amen. Now, I have to tell you something very quickly about Andrea's comments. Just before I had the heart transplant, I told a joke at what happened to me at the yacht club where I blew a hole in Colonel Boomer's dinghy at the start of a race. And I cracked everybody up. And I was telling this thing, and everybody's rapping. And the doctor's assistant came in and said, "This is not funny. What are you telling? There's nothing laughing here. What are you telling stories about? This is a heart transplant." And so what she was saying, she was telling stuff, yes. And then just before the transplant, they found I had a tattoo, and that was another discussion. Yes, so when she's talking, yes, this stuff, yes. So good morning, Felix. Good morning, Rick and Judy. Andrea's here with that thing. Nick is here. Maureen Sullivan. Karen Paul is on the road, so we thank her for joining in with us. Chet is here, my classmate. Pam, thank you for reading this morning, and best to your cat. By the way, did you see that stained glass of Julian of Norwich had a cat in it? Grimmy, thank you much. Thank you much. Pat Sullivan is from Forest Hill. Cecilia from down the street. Serge is here this morning. Kay from 10 miles west of Merritt Island. Cindy and Larry Deach from Port Orange. Pat can care from here too. Alan and Eddie are here from New York, staying for a couple of weeks. And Chris Diaz is here from North Miami. Thank you very much for being with us. And we're going to ask you if you would be kindly, we'll let you know what happens, but it's now time for a special meeting of All Souls Board.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Great
Hey,
service,
Mr.
everyone. Take
Great
care.
service. Take care.
Bye.